Welcome to what truly matters. Have you ever felt like your entire world was falling apart? Like everything you built, everything you knew, everything you were was suddenly gone? Maybe it was the end of a relationship you thought would last forever. The person you imagined growing old with suddenly walking away. Maybe it was losing a job that defined who you were. That title on your business card that made you feel important, valuable, needed. Maybe it was a dream that died before it had a chance to bloom. A door that slammed shut before you could even step through. A chapter that ended before you were ready to turn the page. And in that moment, when everything feels like it's ending, when the ground beneath your feet disappears, when you look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back, it's almost impossible to see what's actually happening. Because endings don't feel like beginnings. They feel like death. They feel like failure. They feel like punishment for something you must have done wrong. They feel like the universe is telling you that your time is up, your chance is over, your story has reached its conclusion. We fight endings. We bargain with them. We replay every moment, wondering what we could have done differently. We hold on so tightly to what's slipping away that our hands bleed from the effort. But what if I told you something that might change everything? What if I told you that every ending you've ever faced was actually a beginning in disguise? What if the moments you thought were destroying you were actually rebuilding you? What if the doors that closed were making space for doors you didn't even know existed? What if loss isn't the end of your story, but the plot twist that makes everything that comes after possible? Today, I want to share a story with you. A true story about a woman named Margaret, who lost everything she thought defined her, and discovered who she really was. This is a story about endings and beginnings, and the mysterious, painful, beautiful way life works when we're brave enough to trust it, even when trust feels impossible. Margaret had been a high school English teacher for 23 years. 23 years of early mornings that started in darkness, grading papers until her eyes burned, and pouring her heart into teenagers who sometimes cared and sometimes didn't. But she loved it. Teaching wasn't just what she did. It was who she was. She was Mrs. Henderson, the teacher who stayed after school to help struggling students, even when it meant missing dinner with her own family. The one who cried at every graduation, watching her students walk across that stage, knowing she had played some small part in getting them there. The one who kept letters from former students in a blue shoebox under her bed, reading them whenever she felt discouraged or wondered if any of it mattered. You changed my life, Mrs. Henderson. You were the first person who believed in me. I wouldn't have graduated without you. Each letter was proof that she mattered, that her life had meaning. At 56 years old, Margaret had her life figured out. She would teach until she was 65, retire with a decent pension, maybe volunteer at the library, travel a little, Italy perhaps, or Ireland. It was all planned, safe, predictable. And then the letter came. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, in her school mailbox between a parent's thank you note and a flyer about a staff meeting. Budget cuts, restructuring, early retirement packages, position elimination. The words blurred on the page as Margaret read them again and again, trying to make them say something different. But they didn't. After 23 years of dedicated service, she was being let go. Oh, they called it early retirement and made it sound like an opportunity, a gift even. But Margaret knew the truth. She was being pushed out, replaced by someone younger, cheaper, erased. The last day of school was torture. Students hugged her, brought her flowers, made her cards. Some cried, the ones who understood what was happening. Her colleague of 15 years, Jennifer, held her hand and whispered, "It's not fair. You still have so much to give." Margaret held it together through the goodbyes, through the cake in the teacher's lounge, through packing up 23 years of her life into cardboard boxes. She held it together until she got to her car, alone in the parking lot where she had parked 5 days a week for more than 2 decades. Then she sat behind the wheel and sobbed, deep, gasping sobs that came from somewhere she didn't know existed inside her. She gripped the steering wheel and felt like she was drowning. Who was she without teaching? Who was Mrs. Henderson when there were no more students to teach, no more papers to grade, no more reason to set her alarm for 6 in the morning? The answer terrified her. She didn't know. The first month of retirement was the darkest period of Margaret's life. She would wake up each morning, and for a split second, she'd forget. She'd start to get up, start to plan her day around her classes. And then reality would crash over her like a wave. There were no classes, no students waiting for her, nothing. So she would turn over and go back to sleep. Some days she didn't get up until noon. Some days she didn't get up at all. She stopped answering calls from friends who asked how she was enjoying retirement, as if losing her identity was something to enjoy. She stopped going to her book club. She spent hours staring at the TV without really watching anything, just letting the noise fill the terrible silence of her empty life. Her daughter, Emma, who lived 3 hours away, had been calling every few days. But Margaret kept the conversation short and superficial. "I'm fine, honey, just adjusting." But she wasn't fine. She was disappearing. Emma must have sensed it, because one Saturday morning, she showed up unannounced. She let herself in with the spare key and found her mother still in her pajamas at 2 in the afternoon, sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. "Mum," Emma said gently, sitting beside her and taking her hand. It was cold. Everything felt cold lately. Margaret looked at her daughter and tried to smile, but it came out wrong. "You didn't have to drive all this way." "Yes, I did," Emma said, "because you can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" Margaret asked, even though she knew. "Disappearing. Giving up." "Mum, you're acting like your life is over." "It feels like it is," Margaret whispered, and she meant it. It truly felt like everything that mattered, everything that gave her life meaning, had ended. Emma was quiet for a moment, studying her mother's face, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped, the emptiness in her gaze. Then she said something that Margaret would remember for the rest of her life. "Mum, when I was 8 years old, I asked you why caterpillars have to become butterflies. Do you remember what you told me?" Margaret turned to look at her daughter, confused. That was almost 20 years ago. "No, what did I say?" "We were in the backyard, and I had found a chrysalis hanging from the fence. I was worried about the caterpillar. I thought it was dying. And you knelt down next to me and said that sometimes we have to completely fall apart to become what we were always meant to be." Emma's voice grew softer, more emotional. "You said the caterpillar doesn't die, it transforms. And that the dark, scary chrysalis isn't an ending, it's a beginning. You said it's where the magic happens." Margaret felt tears sting her eyes. She had forgotten that conversation, forgotten her own words. How strange that the wisdom we give to others is so hard to remember when we need it ourselves. "Mum," Emma continued, squeezing her hand tighter, "you're in your chrysalis right now, and I know it's dark and scary. I know you can't see what's happening. But what if you're not ending? What if you're transforming?" Those words planted a seed, a tiny seed of possibility in the darkness. Margaret didn't feel transformed. She felt broken. But maybe, just maybe, there was a difference between being broken and being broken open. The next morning, for the first time in weeks, Margaret got up, showered, and got dressed. She didn't know what she was going to do or where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay in the dark anymore. She started taking walks in the park, near her house, something she never had time for when she was teaching. At first, it was just something to do, a way to fill the empty hours. But slowly, she started to notice things. The way the morning light filtered through the trees, the sound of birds, the feeling of her body moving, still strong, still capable. On one of these walks, about 3 weeks after Emma's visit, she noticed an older man feeding the ducks at the pond. He came every morning, same time, with a bag of feed and a folding chair. One morning, Margaret gathered her courage and sat on the bench near him. "You really love those ducks," she said, trying to remember how to talk to people. The man smiled, his weathered face crinkling around kind eyes. "I love having a reason to get up in the morning." That simple sentence hit Margaret like a physical blow. A reason to get up in the morning. That's what she had lost. That's what she was searching for. They started talking. His name was Robert, and he was 72. His wife had died 3 years ago after 47 years of marriage, and he had spent 2 years completely lost. He understood endings. He understood that terrible feeling of being untethered from everything that made life make sense. The ducks had saved him, he said. Something simple, something that needed him, something that gave his days structure and purpose. But the ducks were just the beginning, Robert said, his eyes twinkling. Once I started showing up for them, I started showing up for other things too. It's funny how that works. One small act of showing up leads to another. He told her about the community centre where he now volunteered 3 days a week, teaching woodworking to at-risk youth, boys who reminded him of his own son, who had got into trouble as a teenager but turned his life around. "Turns out," Robert said, "that the worst day of my life, losing my wife, eventually led to some of the best days. Not because I stopped missing her. I miss her every single day. But because I learned that my life still had purpose, that I still had something to give, that my story wasn't over just because that chapter ended." Margaret walked home that day with something she hadn't felt in months. Curiosity. What did she have to give? What could her new beginning look like? She started small. She started volunteering at the local library, just a few hours a week, Tuesday and Thursday mornings. It felt good to be around books again, to be around people, to have somewhere to be. One day, about 2 months into her volunteering, the librarian, Patricia, mentioned they were looking for someone to run a literacy program for adults who never learned to read properly. "Would you be interested?" Patricia asked. "I know you were a teacher." Margaret's first instinct was to say no. Teaching had ended. That chapter was closed. But then she remembered the caterpillar, the chrysalis, the transformation. And she remembered Robert's words. One small act of showing up leads to another. "Yes," she heard herself say, "I'd like to try." The first class had 3 students, 3 adults in their 40s and 50s, embarrassed and nervous, sitting in a small room at the library. Margaret looked at them, Carlos, Maria and Dennis, and saw something familiar. Fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of failing. Fear of being seen as less than. But she also saw courage. The courage it took to walk through that door. The courage it took to admit you needed help. Margaret looked at them and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Needed. And not just needed, called. These weren't teenagers forced to be there. These were people who chose to come. People who wanted to learn. people who had been carrying shame for decades and were finally brave enough to try. Carlos, a 47-year-old construction worker, had dropped out of school in 3rd grade. He could barely read a menu. Maria, 53, had hidden her illiteracy her entire adult life, memorizing orders at restaurants, pretending to understand forms. Dennis, 42, had learning disabilities that were never diagnosed as a child. Margaret started slowly, gently, building their confidence word by word, sentence by sentence. And something extraordinary happened. She fell in love with teaching all over again. But this time it was different, deeper, more meaningful, because these students weren't learning to pass a test. They were learning to read bedtime stories to their grandchildren, to fill out job applications, to read the menu at a restaurant without pretending, to stop hiding a secret that had shaped their entire lives. When Carlos read his first complete book, a simple children's book about a dog named Max, he cried. Margaret cried. Everyone in the room cried. "I'm 47 years old," Carlos said, his voice breaking, "and I just read my first book. My grandson is 3. Maybe I can read to him now." The program grew. 3 students became 6. 6 became 12. Word spread. There was a safe place to learn. A kind teacher who wouldn't judge. Margaret recruited other retired teachers. They moved to a bigger room. The local newspaper did a story on them. One evening, almost 2 years after that devastating letter from the school district, Margaret sat in her living room, surrounded by thank you cards from her adult students. She picked up one from Maria, written in careful handwriting. "Mrs. Henderson, you gave me my life back. 53 years I lived in shame. I thought it was too late for me, but you showed me that it's never too late to begin again. Thank you for not giving up on yourself, so you could be here for us. You saved my life." Margaret read those words through tears, but this time they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of gratitude, tears of wonder, because she finally understood. That letter from the school district wasn't an ending. It was an invitation. An invitation to discover a purpose she never would have found if she had stayed where she was. An invitation to meet people she never would have met. An invitation to become someone she didn't know she could be. The ending had been a beginning all along. She just couldn't see it from inside the chrysalis. Margaret's story is our story. Because we've all been there, haven't we? Standing in the ruins of something that ended, unable to see what might be beginning. We've all had moments when life closed a door so forcefully that we thought we'd never find another one. When we lost something so important that we forgot we were still here, still breathing, still capable of new things. But here's what Margaret's story teaches us. Endings are not punishments. They're redirections. They're not life saying you're done. They're life saying you're ready for something different. Think about it. Really think about it. How many times in your life has something ended that, at the time, felt devastating, but that eventually led you to something better? That relationship that ended and broke your heart, but made space for the person you're with now, or taught you how to be alone without being lonely. That job you lost, that pushed you toward a career you actually love. That dream that died, that made room for a dream you didn't even know you had. We resist endings because we're afraid. We're terrified. We're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of starting over. We're afraid that we won't find something as good, something as meaningful, something that makes us feel as valuable as what we lost. But the truth is this: when we cling to what's ending, we block what's beginning. When we hold on to the caterpillar, we prevent the butterfly. When we refuse to let go of who we were, we can't become who we're meant to be. And yes, the chrysalis is dark. Transformation is uncomfortable. There's a period where you're neither who you were nor who you're becoming. You're in between, undefined, lost. It feels like death, because in a way it is. Death of the old self, death of the old story, death of the old identity. But that in-between space, that terrifying, disorienting, painful in-between space, that's where the magic happens. That's where you discover strengths you didn't know you had. Where you meet people you never would have met. Where you find purposes you never would have discovered if everything had stayed the same. Margaret didn't plan to become a literacy teacher for adults. That wasn't on her vision board. That wasn't part of her carefully mapped out retirement plan. But it became the most meaningful work of her life. Precisely because it wasn't what she planned. It was what life had planned for her. And that's the key. Sometimes we have to let go of our plan so we can discover life's plan. Sometimes we have to stop forcing our story in one direction so it can flow in the direction it was always meant to go. Sometimes the ending isn't about what we did wrong. It's about what's trying to go right. It's about clearing space, making room, redirecting us towards something we couldn't see while we were looking in the other direction. Every ending carries within it the seed of a new beginning. But we have to be willing to plant it. We have to be willing to water it with our tears, fertilize it with our courage, and give it time to grow. We have to be willing to show up, even when we don't know what for. We have to be willing to say yes to things we didn't plan. We have to be willing to walk through doors we didn't even know were there. Robert found his beginning with the ducks. Margaret found hers with Carlos, Maria, and Dennis. And you? Your beginning is waiting too. It might not look like what you planned. It might not be what you expected. But it might be exactly what you need. So, if you're in an ending right now, if you're in the darkness, in the chrysalis, in the place where everything feels lost and nothing makes sense, I want you to hear this. Your story isn't over. This isn't the end. This is the transformation. And I know you can't see it yet. I know it feels like death, like failure, like the universe is punishing you. But what if, just what if, this ending is the kindest thing that could happen to you? What if this closed door is protecting you from a path that would have kept you small? What if this loss is making space for a gain you can't even imagine yet? Margaret couldn't see it when she sat in her car, crying in that parking lot. But 2 years later, sitting in that library with Carlos reading his first book, she could. She could see that everything had to fall apart, so something better could come together. And you will too, but only if you keep going. Only if you show up, even when you don't want to. Only if you stay open to the possibility that every ending is a beginning in disguise. You don't have to see the whole staircase. You just have to take the next step. And then the next one. One small act of showing up leads to another. One tiny moment of courage opens the door to the next one. Your new beginning is waiting. It might not look like what you planned, but it might be exactly what you need. Now, if this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own endings and new beginnings, if it gave you even the smallest spark of hope, I want to ask you to do a few things. First, leave a like on this video. It helps more people find these stories. And you never know who might need to hear this message today. Your simple click might be the encouragement someone needs to keep going. Second, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. We're building something special here. A community of people who believe that even in life's darkest moments, there's always a reason to believe. That what truly matters is recognizing that life always has a purpose, even when we can't see it yet. Third, share this video with someone who's going through an ending right now. Someone who's in the darkness. Someone who needs to Hear that the chrysalis isn't the end. It's the beginning of the transformation. You might be the light they need today. And finally, leave a comment. Tell me, what ending in your life turned out to be a beginning? What closed door led you to an open window? What loss became a gain? Your story matters. Your experience matters. And it might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Because here's the truth. We're all in this together. We're all going through endings and beginnings. We're all transforming. And when we share our stories, we remind each other that we're not alone, that the darkness is temporary, that the butterfly is coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being open to these stories. Thank you for believing that what truly matters is how we show up for life, even when life feels like it's falling apart. Remember, you're not ending, you're transforming. And every ending really is a new beginning. Trust the transformation. And you, what truly matters to you,